Welcome
How you
back.
doing? Good to be
Good,
back.
good. Josiah from Three Markets Pod. We were talking. I think we had a session maybe like a week ago or so,
A couple weeks ago. Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, and went pretty well. And yeah, it's great to have you back on. I figure we can dive into some markets. I know there was a market that you were talking about that is, I think, like a couple interesting markets you were talking about, and then there's some mentioned markets as well that we could kind of get into. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got up the one that I wanted to talk about. So my co-host Matt and I on the Three Markets Pod, we tend to do two kinds of content. We do some market analysis, and then we also do some industry news and analysis, which I know you do a little bit as well of. Talking about the growth of prediction markets. There's kind of just so much happening in the space. It can be hard to keep up with if you're not just absolutely glued to Twitter, right? So we kind of try to cover that, but then also bring on traders and bring our own kind of strategy of like which markets are we looking at, where do we think that there is alpha, and especially in terms of like where can you actually get an informational advantage, um, in mentioned markets, for instance, there's people who are very good, I think, at looking at historical transcripts, building priors based on transcripts, and then layering in like current events and taking kind of a Bayesian approach to like what extenuating circumstances will cause this or that. The one that has stood out to me, and there's now a ton of markets like this, is the one you have up here, the top 5 most searched people on Google 2025. I can quickly share a tab here. Press see if I can get the right one. I have way too many tabs open. But basically, we shared a Twitter thread about this just about a week ago, where we kind of just pointed out some of how we're approaching a market like this, right? So I said this is some of the most mispriced prediction markets, and at the time, I think this was even more mispriced. But Polymarket just launched a bunch of markets for some of the other categories. The ones we're looking at are the number one searched person on Google this year. They've also launched markets for the number one searched movie, the number one searched actor, the number one searched television series, etc. And my approach to this is, frankly, not to rely too much on Google Trends. There's a few things going on, I guess. I'll back up and say the first thing, and this has been pointed out a lot on Twitter by prediction market traders, is that the name right out the gate is highly misleading. It's not, the market does not resolve based on raw search volume. If it did, then the number one most searched person, for instance, would almost definitely be Donald Trump. I mean, if you just look at Google Trends, or if you even just, use your imagination, there's a lot of search volume for Donald Trump. Instead, though, the way that these markets resolve is based on kind of the authoritative Google year-in search. And what this is a annual roundup that the Google Trends team publishes in early to mid-December. And it highlights a bunch of what happened in news, passings, people, entertainment, musicians, movies. These are all kind of the number one most searched queries. What we find if we scroll down to their little data methodology, page here, is that their methodology looks at trending searches, which are those that have increased the most in the year relative, I believe, to the prior year, or in other words, had the highest spike in search volume in this year. So it almost has nothing to do with raw search volume, John. It has everything to do instead with growth in how much that item is being searched.
hmm, Interesting. So basically, like Google Trends, Google, yeah. Because when I was looking into this market, my first instinct was to go to like Google Trends. I actually went into Chat GPT and I just asked like point blank. I mean, obviously it's Donald Trump, but I was like, okay, well, Pope Leo's obviously winning here. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like why is that? And
Mm-hmm.
clearly, like a lot of these other guys get searched. So it's based off of search. It's not based off of search volume. It's based off of search growth, as in like how much, like comparatively, like how much has, like, Mom Donnie search grown over the
Correct. Right. And if a person doesn't read like the resolution criteria, the easiest way to tell, I think, is based on some of the outcomes that the Polymarket has selected. Like when I saw this, I'm immediately wondering, why is Bianca Censori on the list? Like, why is that a given option, and why is she relatively high? I mean, this is like Kanye West's fiance, but it's kind of just like, why would she even show up on the list? This is like a relatively unknown person. And then you do a little bit of digging, and it's because there was kind of a spike in queries for her name when earlier in the year it came out that Bianca and Kanye were getting engaged or something. I don't really know the entire lore behind her being one of the outcomes. And if you look at her 2024 volume, it's quite low. It's a relatively unknown person. I think they probably were dating by 2024. But it's all about kind of like who had a spike then in the year 2025 such that they might have the most growth in being a searched person prior to the last year. So right out the gate, looking at this list, like names like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Taylor Swift, these are names that have really high baselines. And I would bet that as traders realized how this resolved, yeah, like you can see Taylor Swift originally, well, she never had a very high chance here, but there was a 6% chance. And then I think as people have realized that this is really about growth in the search term Trump, for instance, if we look at the history here, like, right out the gate, people were kind of just reading the title of this market and assigning a 76% likelihood that it would resolve to Trump. And then as traders have kind of wisened up and realized that this is about growth, his odds have slipped down to 13%. I still think that that's quite high, and I can
Yeah.
get the why.
Yeah. No, same here. Like 13, but like after you've just explained it, I still think that the Donald Trump, like 13%, I still think you could fade this year and make some
Mhm.
money.
Mhm.
Um, because I mean, Pope Leo now makes a lot more sense.
It
Uh,
does. Yeah.
yeah,
The fascinating thing about Pope Leo is that that is his papal name, right? I think it's called. He chose to take on the name Pope Leo the 14th when he, was elected to, when he became Pope. Prior to that, he was a cardinal. I think it was Cardinal, let me get this right, Cardinal Robert Prevost. And so
yeah,
he changed his name effectively. So there would have been almost no reason for people to have been searching Pope Leo the 14th in the year 2024, which means the baseline number for year over year growth is very, very low, or close to zero. So it's much easier for queries for Pope Leo the 14th to see a huge jump year over year versus someone like Elon Musk, who has a very high baseline of being searched kind of on a regular basis. Certainly with Doge and other things that Elon did earlier in the year, you'd expect his search volume to improve. But you do have to take into account, like, kind of, was this person more popular in the past year? Donald Trump, for instance, I think had a huge surge in volume around the election in November 2024. And so that would sort of reset that baseline and make it more difficult for him to be more searched this year than in the prior year.
yeah. And what is the best way to kind of find these spikes in search growth? Like, how have you been doing this?
Totally. I'm glad you asked. Let's get into it. So the first stop for everyone, if you will, is Google Trends. And it's a bit of a mistake to think that we can just use Google Trends. But if we, for instance, put in Donald Trump, and we'll use the topic, I'll highlight this. Like, there's two different things going on Google Trends when you search something. You can look at volume for just the search term, which is almost like just the string, or you can look at it for the topic, and that typically gives you a little bit more information here. My understanding, and I could be wrong on this, but my understanding is that the way that the trends team builds this year in search, review, is that they're using topics. So like we would not, for instance, look for Bianca Censori as the search term. We would look for Bianca Censori as the Australian designer. I believe that's the way that they're looking for people. And what a lot of people might do is they might put in Trump and a couple other names, any of the names that are on the list, without realizing that what we're getting here is a score between 0 and 100, and the data is normalized. So this is basically showing us the relative strength for the query Trump, and we see that it's consistently strong, and then it sort of peaked, certainly around the last election, November 6th, 2020. November 6th, 2025. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at just the past day. LOL. Let me look at the past 5 years. That makes way more sense. So you can see, yeah, here's a couple peaks. Like the peak is July of 2024, and then once again, this is the election, November 3rd through 9th of 2024. This is not telling us anything about raw search volume, though. This is only telling us about relative strength in this query, relative to other times. It's almost like this is the time that, this query was more popular relative to all queries being made versus here, but we can't really impute anything about this chart versus if we look at the same chart for someone else.
Yeah, and what we're really looking at, like what we're trying to find is like, just point of fact, 2025 had more search volume on Trump than 2024. That's
Right.
basically
Yes.
what,
Yes.
yeah.
So the thing that makes the most sense to do when we are using just Google Trends, first of all, I'll highlight that you definitely want this to be set to worldwide, because that, I believe, is what the Trends team is looking at when they set these lists. And then we'll set our time range to be not this year, but we'll set it to be the start of last year through to today. And the reason for that is just so we can intuit a little bit about like the area under the curve for the entire year of 2024 versus the area under the curve for the entire year of 2025. His relative highest strength again was in November of 24. And even just looking at this, certainly the baseline strength looks a little bit higher in 25. But it doesn't look like there's a ton of year over year growth in searches kind of writ large. Um, there's another trap I'll highlight that traders will fall into. If I add to this, for instance, let's just add Taylor Swift, and I add the singer songwriter Taylor Swift. What's happened now is Google Trends has again normalized Taylor Swift's data, and because we're doing a comparison here, they've normalized her data around the peak, which is a piece of Trump data. So in other words, whichever query it has the relative highest strength, that kind of becomes the top. And I'll demonstrate this by adding a word like, let's see if Google comes up more. So Google now, is a much more searched term than either Donald Trump or Taylor Swift. And that is kind of, the new baseline by which these things are being measured. And it's, unfortunately, we're losing fidelity on how we can even read Taylor Swift. Like you can almost think of this as 2% of kind of search volume relative to Google being the 94% of search volume. But if you do find a word that's very consistently Googled, like we can use the word how, this is, we can assume that how is Googled relatively the same amount, just people are searching how, whatever. It becomes kind of a way to at least sort of look at, to get closer to apples comparisons when we're looking at two different people like Trump and Taylor Swift. But we lose so much fidelity that, now Taylor Swift is just showing up as one or less than one on almost every query or on almost every day. So the Trends tool alone is not enough.
Yeah, that I mean, it's really interesting too, because I think after you explained the Pope Leo thing, I was like, okay, well, it looks like a lock, but it's only at 40%. Is there any reason for why, in terms of conviction, where the market is right now? Would you say that is pretty good conviction? Like, would you say that in turn, I mean, you have again, you have like the whole kind of Catholic population, which is huge. You have a new name, a newly minted name,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still very undervalued, and the year's almost over. So I'm wondering, like, what is the hesitation in this market right now? Like, what are people still looking for? Are they looking for something like, some big event to happen, or, curious as to your thoughts on that, because
I'm shocked. Like I'm a little bit shocked that Pope Leo is still only at 48%. One reason this could be is because we actually talk about this in the new episode of the Three Markets Pod that's gonna drop tomorrow. But there's a little bit of a framing bias, I think, that traders can have, or that they might be aware of, where on a market like this, Google could put any person that they want at the top of this list. And the team at Polymarket has attempted to discern what are the names, that are kind of the most likely to be ones that are on that traders would want to trade around. But there's no option on the market at the moment for just like any other person. And sometimes you see this, sometimes they introduce it a little bit later, but it's possible, like a trader might look at the search volume or trends across, every single one of these names, and they might accurately ascertain which of these names had the most growth year over year from 2024 to 2025. But it could be the case that the Polymarket team didn't even offer the correct outcome markets, and that there's a name we're not even thinking of for some reason, which saw, tremendously more growth. So certainly there's a little bit of a discount, I think, for that possibility. If we instead look at the market for top 5 most searched people on Google, because remember the year in search kind of website report names kind of the 5, or actually the top 10, I think, person queries that grew in volume. Here you see the Pope trading at 86%. And it could be that this is in part to, because he might not be the number 1, he might be the number 2, 3, 4, or 5. But in part, it could also be because, okay, now there's room for a name that's not given on the number 1 most searched person market to be number 1. But we are confident that he will be in there on that list. But yeah, it's a question of like, did the Polymarket team even select the exact right outcomes when building this market?
Yeah, yeah, and I think also just maybe it has something to do with the market being you have to read into the market a little bit. I mean, maybe, is this market exactly the same? Is it the same type of resolution outcome?
It is the same resolution, yes. If they are ranked in the top 5 of Google's year in search people list for 2025. Yes. So even in this market though, I will say, just looking at it, like, I think Donald Trump is way too high, in my opinion. I don't know that Donald Trump will show up on this list at all, in my opinion. Just knowing that he has a really high baseline, I think there's still a mistake being made in this market by people who think that this is a measurement of raw search volume, or
Yeah.
else you have to explain why he's getting, more queries. Remember, again, Pope Leo the 14th did not exist really as a query in the year 2024. So when you're talking about year over year growth, you're starting at a baseline of almost 0. And so even if he's only searched, 1,000 times, it's like a divide by 0 growth. It's not exactly, but the growth is huge. Zoran Mamdani, for instance, it was relatively unknown in 2024, and then got a ton of coverage, a ton of, I would guess, search volume in the year 2025 from a very, very low baseline. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Kendrick Lamar, Taylor Swift, these are people who I think have pretty consistent search volume, and it's much harder to show growth.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that is definitely the mistake that seems to be being made. If Donald Trump is showing up, same with Elon Musk. I mean, those would be really good fades right now, I think, just based off this
Yeah, right.
market.
Right. Totally.
I mean, 44% is high, 38% is high. Who's that? Kendrick Lamar. I don't even know why Kendrick Lamar is on there.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. This is where I do wonder about just the absolute framing by it, or the Matt had a better term when we recorded today's episode. It comes from the book Thinking Fast and Slow, right? But there's a sort of bias where you're just, I think it's called like activation bias. It's the options that are presented to you are the ones that you're automatically considering. But somebody on the Polymarket team chose to put Kendrick Lamar in this market, and Bad Bunny, and why couldn't it have also been insert other artist?
yeah, this is a really interesting market. I'll probably open a few trades on it, to be honest, because I saw you guys tweeting about it on your account, which by the way, people should follow your account.
Thank
You guys are like really good at this stuff. So for people watching, definitely give Three Markets Pod a follow.
The last thing I'll leave you with on in terms of this market and the related ones is this idea of proxy data. This is kind of what we shared on our account some time ago, but in thinking about the fact that Google Trends doesn't itself give you raw search data, we kind of started to think about what would be a good proxy for popularity on Google, and which is publicly available data, given that raw Google search data is not. And the answer to that, I think, or at least a decent proxy, is Wikipedia page views, which are public. So if I just come onto Wikipedia page views and we look for like page views of Trump, I think Wikipedia is a typical stop for people who are searching a name. We'll just add Trump, Pope Leo the 14th. Maybe we'll add like Taylor Swift here
Oh, that's
as
great.
well.
Yeah.
Right, and it's kind of just like you would guess that this is at least decently related to the spikes, at least line up with the spikes on Google Trends. But now we have actual numbers rather than just relative numbers that Google Trends is giving us. There's a little bit of a gap here in that like this particular chart I think is showing us only page views for the English version of Wikipedia. If we instead use this Lang views tab, that actually finds page views across all of the different language versions. And in that, I think you see that Pope Leo the 14th has an even bigger spike, right? As sort of a larger target for international search traffic. But just looking at this, I mean, the spike in the Pope's traffic around the time that he was named the Pope is massive. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
so massive. It's kind of, I mean, it's burying Taylor Swift and Donald Trump. We could try a few other names. We could even let's try Zoran.
Yeah, and this is good because yeah, there's a spike there. Not well, yeah,
A pretty good spike.
it's a good spike.
Given, I mean, again, here's Trump around the election. This blue is Trump around the election. So at the presidential election, so you go, whoa, for a New York City mayoral, this I think was the primary. This is when he won the primary. And I think people were just saying, who is that guy? It's a decent spike. Does this align perfectly with Google search volume? Like, I can't say that for sure, but it's definitely a decent proxy. And he's coming from a baseline of, I mean, here's the page views for Zoran, in let's say December of 2024 on a given day, it's like 600. So the
Yeah.
baseline is almost nothing,
Yeah, I think I think it could be a good top five play for sure. I mean, I think
Right,
I
right,
think
exactly.
definitely.
I would never, I wouldn't, I guess I would not trade Zoran for number one, but I am trading him for top five.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's
Next.
yeah, that's really interesting. And I think you're right too. I think like does it line up exactly? Probably not, but it's all just, it's all diffused, right? So this is going to be like a smaller version of that probably.
Totally,
Yeah,
totally.
so I think that's a good way to kind of find this stuff. Yeah, yeah,
And
really
I'm realizing that
interesting.
I had that cropped to before the New York City mayoral election finished, and his, at least on Wikipedia, I don't know if this extends to Google, but his spike there is even larger than Trump's spike after winning the presidential, which is kind of crazy. But again, this could be because people don't know the name. They everyone kind of knows the name Donald Trump. They might not need to visit his Wikipedia page. But that is kind of a wild thing to say there.
Yeah, and it's I mean Zoran Mamdani, it's again it's like it's a unique name, right? It's but his father also had a little bit of fame too. So but I doubt he's getting the search volume that Zoran's getting.
Right, right.
So it's interesting. What did you end up trading that, by the way? Did you trade the election? Because I know it was basically a poly bond. I mean, it was one of the few like huge bonds.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So Matt and I together, we actually have a combined account for the Three Markets Pod, and we've been toying with like how we want to do content, because we've never actually kind of disclosed that account, but we've been toying with the idea that like maybe we're kind of making trade decisions on the pod and kind of tracking a shared portfolio for the pod. And one thing we did, which we didn't even publish in one of our live episodes, is leading up to the election, we felt that Zoran at like 98% was too high. Like I'm just like, I don't know. I've seen a lot of upsets. I had a hypothesis that like, again, I was nearly certain that Zoran would win, but do I think he wins 98 out of 100 times that we run that election? I don't know. I was kind of thinking like, I think a lot of his support comes from younger people who maybe have moved to New York City. Are they actually registered to vote in the election? The Cuomo voters are probably more of like the kind of New York City voting base, like multi-generational New Yorkers, if you will. So we actually took the long shot and put a very, very, very tiny bet on Cuomo. given that, while acknowledging that we were almost sure Zoran would win, but also that 98 or 97, whatever he was at, felt a little overpriced. So other people were bonding it. We were kind of the other side of that trade.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I did the,
Did you?
'cause the opportunity was too good. It was like, look, like I understand. You know what I did? I definitely played the swing down because I knew that people would get cold feet towards the end of it,
Right.
which is like, like as election, because it was trading at like 90, 90, 90, and then I think it
Yep.
dipped down to like 88 at one point.
It did. It totally did. And
Yeah.
you would think, like, as vote counts come in, as the election results come in, there might be a moment where it looks like Cuomo is at least doing better than you thought he would do. And so maybe, don't trade it to resolution, but just trade it, with the intent of kind of trading the volatility going into election results and then get out. To your point, you could have doubled your money doing that,
Yeah, yeah. I think it was. I think it was. That's one way to kind of play these elections. We did like a very like kind of as a side callback to another episode. We did a interview with Mr. Ozzy, who basically explained that like the best elections that you want to kind of find, like the best elections you want to play are elections in countries where there's a lot of undecided voters, because then you get those massive asymmetric swings up
Right.
or down towards
Right.
the end of the election, which is really fun to play.
Totally.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So okay. So we have. So I know you have a hard stop in a few minutes. There's several markets we could do. One, I kind of want to cover a mention market. So
Totally.
there's two mention markets with Trump. There's one where he's, going to be with the PM of Hungary, Viktor Orban, and I think he's doing a press conference with him or something like that on the 7th. And then there's one with the new Syrian president.
Let's do the Syrian one.
Okay. Let me go in,
because I did see at least a New York Times article, I think, covering this, that I think was saying it is the first time that the president of Syria will visit Washington since he came to power. So kind of an interesting event.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I tried to dig up some information on this, and first of all, it's like things that Trump will say, right? So fortunately, it's not the Syrian president, because I saw an interview with him and it's all in Arabic. I think he hasn't really publicly spoken in English yet, but I do think he kind of understands it, but he responds in Arabic generally. So yeah, so we have like some options here that I've been looking at. Crown, which was one that I was looking at, which maybe like he'll mention, like maybe there's a chance that he'll mention like the Saudi, crown prince, Saudi Arabia. Like there might be something there. I don't understand dancing at all. I don't know where that comes from.
That's another example of like the framing bias of the words that the market editors are using. They have some context in the back of their head, and so we've already shrunk the possibility of all words, and it influences these markets. Like there's almost like a positive bias just because it made the list.
Yeah. I mean, like I found one clip of Trump talking about him, and I'll just play it like really quickly, so we have some context here, so we can make some guesses. So yeah, he's being very diplomatic there. That's the one thing I can get from that, is like he's saying strong past, and that kind of ties into I guess he has like some history with Al Qaeda or something. I don't know too much about it, but I know it's like very controversial. So he's clearly describing him in a very diplomatic way. Obviously, they took the sanctions off of Syria. They're trying to push this Abraham Accord thing. So I do think Trump is going to come in diplomatic.
Right.
That's kind of my take on looking at this market. I don't know if he'll say handsome, attractive. He might. He does say that a lot.
What else is on here? BB is on here. Nuclear is on here. I don't know the full context for some of these, but what stands out to me is like, okay, this is one of these events, I believe, where they're meeting in the White House, and there's like a press gaggle, right? Like it's a informal press briefing, if you will, but it's not in the White House press room. It's not the president making remarks to reporters, but with Trump, at least with what I've seen, I don't watch many of these, but the press will use the opportunity to ask questions about all kinds of stuff, and he will field those. So it's like you have a visitor from another country, and many of the questions are kind of about that and about whatever is discussed. But then he'll just take like random questions about topical issues. And so this
Yeah.
is on November 10th in 4 days. If the government shutdown hasn't resolved, I would almost be sure that some reporter is going to ask about the government shutdown. I mean, we might have flights grounded by then. This is 4 days from now. So if there was a word that lent toward that, um, it could be interesting. Biden at 4+ times seems really high at 50. I don't think he's going to talk about Biden that much in this. I could be
I
wrong.
think, yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Biden twice. I mean, I think you could play this pretty well. I mean, if you want the easy lock, I think sanction 2 times. I mean, who knows? But, it's trading pretty high right now, but I think that's a fair price.
Do you?
Um,
Interesting. For sanction 2+ times? Could be. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you disagree? Do you think that?
Um, I guess it really does depend, doesn't it, on how much of this event is focused on just remarks between Trump and the president of Syria, versus becoming an all-out press conference. And I feel like sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Like sometimes he takes a bunch of questions, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes the questions are very focused on the issue at hand. Sometimes they're not. Like Ukraine, Russia 5+ times is on this list. That is interesting because for him to mention Ukraine, Russia 5+ times, like we're definitely talking about something a little bit different than the conflict in the Middle East. Sometimes I guess Trump, will equate the two. And so, but 50 something like that feels like sanctions 2+ times. It feels like, is he now talking about sanctions on Russia? Like what exactly is the context? I would also want to familiarize myself more with like the purpose of this meeting though before. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the sanctions 2+ times.
Yeah, well, I think the Ukraine Russia 5 times could come up if the international kind of relations thing spills into more speculation on, what's
Mm.
going on with Putin. I mean, you're definitely going to get talk of Ukraine Russia in the Viktor Orban uh, session, like no doubt. So maybe because these sessions are back to back, maybe there'll be another question about that. Maybe there won't. But
Right.
like, I think that I think that that's one to look at, or maybe like most of the questions on that will be answered in the seventh instead of the 10th. I mean, maybe they won't ask it again. Uh,
Right. That's a very good point.
yeah, so I think Israel Gaza could be good, but yeah, this is the one I don't understand for sure is dancing. That's the one
Yes.
I don't understand that, and it's trading low. Um,
I'll quickly highlight this tool. I'm not deeply familiar with this, but I know a lot of mention market traders will use this tool, mentionmetrics.com. And all this is a amalgamation, I believe, of historic transcripts. But you can select across, a ton of different speakers. I have it on Trump right now, but you can kind of select from companies for earnings reports. I mean, this is built for mention market traders. I'm not even logged in. I don't have the premium yet. Might need to do that. But on my last free search here, I did punch in Trump and the word Biden. And you can see this fall off is because it's weekly data. So we're only part of the way through this week. But it is true that, since about September, his mentions of Biden have kind of steadily climbed, with the caveat that it looks like 42 of those mentions came from this particular Nora O'Donnell interview. So, take all of this kind of with a grain of salt. Um, but certainly an interesting tool. I would want to like plug in the word please to this.
yeah, yeah, this is a great tool. I definitely have to start using this as well as we trade more. But yeah,
Yeah, I
as
think it
I,
was I think it was Predem Trader, the who, notorious mention market trader.
yeah,
I think you guys have had him on, unless I'm mistaken. I think it was him who I saw mention that tool.
we've never had him on. I would love to get him on just to just to
Totally.
interview him because he's just all over this mention market stuff.
He really is. Yeah.
And I remember coming into the space, and he was one of the first guys I followed because I was just like, he was doing these great interviews with people.
Yeah.
And then he went to the mention markets, and yeah, I feel like at some point you're going to be able to follow like streams like that are just
Mhm.
trading mention markets all day, and it'll be like an easy lock for money. Like there's going to be a small window where you can probably do that.
Yeah, yeah. The
Um,
best. Okay, quickly, the best thing I saw this guy say was on another prediction market podcast. They were asking him about trading the Jerome Powell mentioned markets for like the Fed minutes, and he had traded yes for Powell to say pardon. And I think that people thought that the context of that word was like a presidential pardon of some kind. Trump is issuing pardons, whatever. He said he had gone into the transcripts for Jerome Powell, and he rarely said pardon. But if you watched the live, the streams of the videos, when he coughed, he often would say pardon after coughing, and then the transcripts, the official transcripts from the Fed, would cut that out because it's like he's coughing, so they would cut it. So a lot of the tools like the one we just looked at, or even if you're just control Fing on different transcripts, kind of wouldn't show the word pardon showing up. And this guy observed that, Predem Trader observed that, like, well, if he coughs, he often says pardon, went in heavy on the yes for pardon, and then sure enough, he coughed, he said pardon. And it's like there's actual alpha there of realizing that
yeah,
his information source is not the information source that most people are trading on. Really remarkable trade.
yeah, I remember that. That was a really good one. Um, Cool. Well, Jose, I know that we're a little over time. Thank you for kind of indulging that. And
Totally.
yeah, I just think Three Markets Pod is great. I think you guys are doing some good stuff. Yeah. So
Okay.
so what time is the episode tomorrow?
We will be dropping an episode sometime tomorrow. I will try to have it up in the morning. We've yet to make the transition to live, although we're talking about it. But yeah, folks can look out for it. Folks can subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. We post everything there as well. And we'll be back on the Polyfactual stream for sure.
Cool, man. Good having you on.
Thank you, John. Always good to chat.
See you
Peace.
later. Peace out.